DJ, put a nigga back to the record, baby, and give me this right now.
So, ERVs are one of the best proof of evolution that I can even think of. They're called endogenous retroviruses, and how they work is it's a virus that inserts itself into RNA, and then through reverse transcription, I think is the name, it transfers RNA into DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, if you don't know what that means, and RNA is just ribonucleic acid. So we get to that. So once that occurs, it inserts itself. The key point here, the very important part here, is randomly into one of the chromosomes of the host. And not only then, once it's done this, if the virus infects a germ cell, you know, those that make up an egg or sperm, whatever, and that spreads on to offspring, and your offspring will begin to carry that as part of its DNA, and that will spread. So, and should be, if evolution is true, we should be able to find endogenous retroviruses in certain locations. In these random locations, keep in mind that it does insert randomly into a chromosome. So if it does this, in these locations, we should find it in the locations, the same locations of our ancestors, or into a species that we are related to. And guess what? We do. In chimps, we find ERVs located in the exact same spaces in our first 28 chromosomes, or I believe it's the number 27, 28, somewhere around there, maybe 30. In our first, at least less than 30 chromosomes, we can locate it. And I think, and even throughout our entire, like, I think there's hundreds of ERVs located in the exact same space we know them to. And that and the chances, if creation is correct, for us to actually see these for ERVs, or these viruses, these retroviruses, to insert themselves randomly into RNA, transfer into DNA, and insert itself randomly into a chromosome over and over into these exact same places, that is almost impossible. Now, let's show you where they do insert. So before we even touch ERVs, I want to go into another huge proof, and it was kind of a big jump into DNA supporting the idea of evolution or a common ancestor between chimps and humans and other species as well. But here, look at number 2 on this picture, this image here. So you see 1 and 2, and each of these numbers will have 4 chromosomes on them. The first one is a human, the second one is a chimp, the third one is an ape, and the fourth one is a orangutan. So look here and look at number 2 and compare the first two, human and chimp. We can see that in list number 2 we actually have 2 chromosomes for the chimp and orangutan and ape. But if you look here and compare the chimp and the human, you see those 2 chromosomes are, you know, there's actually chimps actually have an extra chromosome. Now, when we compare that to the humans, and what scientists have done when they look at, I believe this is part of phylogenetics, where you can compare these the chromosomes. When you look at the 2 chromosomes side by side, we realize they are the exact same. Well, not the 2 chromosomes, but they are exactly the same as the human. Not exactly, but they are very, very close alike to the human chromosome. So I want to bring up another image so you can see here what I'm trying to talk about. But when you look at this image, you can see the 2 chromosomes, and if they're actually put on top of each other, literally, when we compared the human one to these 2 chromosomes, we were trying to figure out why humans have 1 less chromosome than apes, which actually can be fatal if we did evolve from a common ancestry. To lose a chromosome, that's almost fatal and would probably wipe us out of natural selection. We actually see here that it's 2 of these chromosomes joined together to form that one. So that is not technically a loss of chromosome, and that can bring negative or positive effects, but in this case it definitely brought positive to push us forward in kind of natural selection. But we could see that when comparing them, and we can actually, the reason we know that it's the same chromosomes is because we can see the telomeres where they join together when looking at the ones with the apes. So it's very interesting. That's a very big, one of the very first big proofs of evolution with DNA. So it's really awesome that we found that. But moving on, I would like, it's not only just ERVs, but definitely those two combined really show huge, overwhelming evidence for evolution. So let's move on to this next part. So we do know that ERVs insert randomly into chromosomes, right? So if we can agree on that, we can see when we look and compare humans and chimp chromosomes, and also not just human and chimps, but this is the only two we're going to be talking about, we can find ERVs inserted in the exact same location. And if they insert randomly, that's very odd. That does not make sense for creation. At this point, you have to discover why, because we have an ancestor with chimps. We inherited that ERV, or that retrovirus, from chimps. So look at the number 10 list. You see the 4 chromosomes. Humans and chimps. We can see that there is an ERV located there. So here we are as a closer image. I'll put an arrow of the ERV where it's located, and we can see that the ERV, or the virus, is located in the exact same spot on the human and chimp DNA, or chromosome. So we can see that it's located there. Now the chances of that happening by chance, that 2 ERVs randomly inserted themselves into the chromosome of the same location, is 1 in 3 billion, which is a pretty big number, right? So, but this is not the only ERV located in the exact same spot. Let's look at some other ones. So up there in part list 1, or the ones marked with 1 in the first set, you see in the humans and chimps chromosome there is another ERV located in the exact same spot. And the way they find them, guys, I know it's hard to see in the list of chromosomes, is they can unravel them and find them, because we know what the parts of these chromosomes actually do, the DNA in them. So the chances of that actually occurring is 4.5 times 10 to the 16th power, I think, which is very small, just very small, that occurring. And you have to believe, as a creationist, that these somehow, I don't really know how you would explain this as a creationist. Now there are some arguments that, hey, these were put in by the creator, but since they perform certain activities. Well, ERVs can do harmful things to you as well. They're not the best examples of creation at all. But let's move on. I'll get into that later. Let's move on to show you some other ones, because that's not the only one. There's more. So let's continue. And you know what? I realize just how much time, and I'm not gonna have the time left on SHAREfactory to even do this. I don't even have time to mark them, because there's more. There's an RNA on set on X, chromosome X. There is one on 6, 7, I believe 19, and 22, I think. I'm not so sure about that one. But there are so many more. And each time, like you saw how big the number jumped every time I said one that they were located. It gets infinitesimally high, almost to the point of 1 times 10 to the 40th power, which is very, very unlikely. And for creationists to argue to say that, the Big Bang couldn't, the things of life coming together as like 1 times 10 to the 64th power, or no, what's the number? I'm not even so sure. But to say this, and then there's actually a lot more than this, a lot more ERVs located in the exact same spot, you are incredibly missing something, and you can't make that argument anymore. And ERVs are one of the biggest proofs of evolution. And there's so much things I couldn't even touch on, like how we discover ERVs. Like I know it just looks like I'm marking random points on the chromosome, but they're unraveled, and we can see that they share the exact same kind of lineup as a virus. So we know what they are. But there's a lot of things I wish I could have touched on in this video alone, but I wanted to dedicate it to ERVs and talk a bit about ERVs, because later I want to get into more on DNA, like DNA relations and pseudogenes. Those are very interesting. I'm really interested in getting into pseudogenes and vestigial organs, so I was able to cover chromosomes and I didn't even get to touch on that much, the chromosomes thing. I kind of hurried up to get to that so I can get to ERVs and endogenous viruses, so whatever, we'll touch on that later. Thank you for watching. I mean, I don't use a script, and it makes it hard for me to do this. I don't have much time to do these videos. It takes a lot of time already using this crappy thing. So if you watched all the way through, thank you. Hopefully I'll get some more funny edits like you saw the one yesterday. So either way, hope you enjoyed. Adios. So I'd like to let it know, I like to make it very clear that not all fallacies can be used. Like, don't